please do so. All right, Karen?
Oh, gosh, first up, thank you.
I know, I hate it when that happens to me too.
Okay. As you know, I'm still trying to figure out all the acronyms and what goes to what. So when I looked at page TRB 58, the Teachers Health Benefit Fund kind of it was calling to me, and I wanted to know more about it. So can you kind of tell us about it?
Again, the program that we operate from that fund is the Medicare Premium Payment Program. So that's the fund source for our actual coverage of certain retirees for whom we pick up coverage A and surcharges for coverage A and coverage B under the plan. So we, in about 2000, entered into a situation where we provided for Medicare coverage for certain members who would not otherwise be eligible. And so that fund is designed to pay those premiums. And we have a separate valuation for it. The actual funding is sitting within the DB program. And this is for the administration of that particular program.
So when you say a certain amount or certain members,
Right.
what are we talking about?
There are, I believe, about 7.
Paul?
Thank you. You know, when you come back with more of a presentation on this, I think there's several sort of stories in this budget that are to some degree better understood if they're kind of separated out. In other words, it seems to me that it doesn't really tell us what's going on to say, well, we're increasing the number of employees in investments, and that's offsetting the reduction in the pension solution. I mean, those are very different things. I mean, the pension solution is a finite one-time project, right? Whereas if we're increasing the number of people in investments because we're trying to bring activities in-house, that's going to be long-term. So it seems to me that especially the pension solution, I mean, it may not be the way it's looked at the Department of Finance in terms of the approval of the budget, but from our standpoint in terms of understanding long-term where we're spending money and where our activities are focused, I think it would be good if we just in a presentation perspective separated those out.
Good comment. Thank you.
Joy?
Thank you. So a couple questions, Robin, and so I concur with Paul's comment because I think you maybe presented it that way because we're thinking about how we will be requesting additional funds on the one hand, but netting, but reducing funds elsewhere so that overall in terms of how the Department of Finance looks at our budget, that may be relevant to them. But knowing more about them separately would be helpful. So the comments that you made about looking at our 5-year plan for staffing when looking at potentially bringing some investment activity in-house, you commented on how we will have additional staff costs because we'll be adding staff over the 5 years, but we anticipate that'll be it'll be offset, not in our budget, but in our overall financial picture because we'll be reducing the external fees that we pay. Have we done any analysis or estimate of what we think that'll look like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Chris wants to comment with me, but we basically have a 7-to-1 savings versus expense ratio. So it's quite significant. And I understand your dilemma in terms of looking at the budget because the part that shows the reduction is not represented effectively in this presentation. And it's also compounded even if you look at Chris's long-term plan because assets under management are growing. So you don't see a reduction in net expense. It's actually offsetting the increase. And I'm sorry if I...
No. It's a 10-to-1 ratio. When we bring assets in-house, it generally costs us 1/10 the cost of an outside money manager. Obviously, that varies by asset classes. And now that the investment committee is looking at the private assets, the ratio is potentially significantly larger because in co-investments, you go from the 2 and 20 structure to many times no fee, very little carry. So it really is powerful. And the problem we've always faced here, the fact that your support budget, to get technical, your budget that she's presenting goes to the legislature. So those are kind of green dollars. The continuously appropriated budget, which we use to pay money managers, are blue dollars, and they don't look the same. And so all of a sudden, legislature sees one number, but they don't see, like you're saying, the corresponding savings on the other side at all. It's absolutely invisible to them. And we try, in my business plan, we try to present it as one comprehensive budget so we can see everything, but it literally is broken between above the line and below the line. And it makes operating as a business so tough in this environment. I'll pick on that other fund across the street, the river, not Sacramento County, but the other one. They're continuously appropriated in all their things. So to them, they can almost show that corresponding savings on one and the other. And we tried to tell the legislature, look how much we're saving by bringing assets in-house, but they want to look on this and see where that reduction is because all they see is an increase. So it literally looks like blue dollars, green dollars, and it's hard to show them that. But I think you see the whole picture and you know what we're doing.
So thank you. I actually didn't realize that CalPERS their budget was structured so differently from ours. So that's helpful. And I guess what I would just ask, it sounds like you already are trying to weave that into the story that you're telling in terms of how to advocate for the budget that we're seeking. And I guess I would just encourage that we continue to do that both with the Department of Finance and the administration, but also externally to the extent it makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate it, Joy. I can go back 5 governors. We've tried every time in all the different Department of Finances and literally because it's just the continuous is visible to them. And the legacy of CalPERS dates back to before Jack and I, and it's been baffling ever since why they were able to get everything continuous and we're still stuck in the budget process. So I'll be biased. I think, again, it's teachers being treated differently than public employees, and I call foul, so. Sorry, Department of Finance, it's not your fault. Predated you by a long way.
It's become historic. Joe, did you have anything else?
I have one other question on a different topic. So Robin, my other question is, on the bottom of TRB 55, you've got a table that outlines the budget change detail. And I found this a little bit difficult to look at because what I would have found helpful is to have something that actually showed, this is our budget for 16-17, this is our budget for 17-18, and here are the differences. Whether they're going up or they're going down. I think what you captured in the table on TRB 55 are just the changes, but without the context, I found it difficult to understand. So my specific question is around the 2 line items for the pension solution.
Yes.
For 17-18, it looks like there's almost $27 million savings, or not savings, but we anticipate being under budget.
No, so
Okay.
again, this is, and I appreciate your question. I'm not, I understand that it's difficult to, it's not as clear as it should be from a presentation perspective, so we'll take that feedback. What that's saying is that if you started with the 17-18 number, you have to back out the one-time allotment in that budget for the pension solution from 17-18. So that gets you back to 0 on the pension solution, and then you add in the piece for 18-19. So the 27 million was the part of the 262 at the top that was for the pension solution. So we take that away to get back to the base, and then you add the 17.9 that is in the pension solution BCP for this year.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Okay.
So, again, some of this is, as you're coming from a corporate experience, it's foreign to me in some ways too. So it really is not budgeting from a baseline of nothing. It's budgeting from the prior year's budget, which is why we end up with these questions. And so we're slowly moving ourselves from a presentation perspective to acknowledge that and rebuild it, not in reality, because that's a very expensive process, but from a presentation perspective. So that's what those numbers are doing. So again, if you take the 262, in there was 27 million for the pension solution project. So we take that away, and then we add the almost 18 million that's in the BCP that's already been included in the legislative process for fiscal year 18-19.
So can I just ask just one more quick question? So if you were to show me our 27 or our 17-18 operating budget, and then show next to that our proposed 18-19 budget, would I be able to, would that be helpful for me to see?
Yes, and again, part of the reason we didn't do that is because we wanted to get your input on what we were gonna change.
On the
So
changes.
although we're trying to give you some high-level picture, that probably, based on the discussion here, that might have been a mistake. Because we're really just bringing you, if we do these things, some of which have already been established, like the pension solution, and some of which we're looking for your input on, like the investment BCP in a 5-year time frame. This is what would happen. So you get, and the concept between showing you that is then you look at the value of those dollars as they would be seen externally for the subsequent year. So that, it's what that's telling me as I look at it is this year's budget is 262 million. Next year's budget would be 266 million, and we're just showing you how we got there. Yeah. But I appreciate your questions.
Thanks, Robin, and I appreciate the other questions. What would be helpful to me when the item comes back would be a simple pie chart. We spoke about this, we communicated separately on this. That just as a pie chart by branch, the amount of the 266 next year that's going to the specific branch, the number of number of employees within that branch. And I'd like to see that for 3 years. I'd like to see for 16, 17, 17, 18, and then 18, 19. It provides me a nice visual as to how the dollars are distributed throughout the organization, the number of people that they support, and then it will help me see trends and also provide me with the level of questions that I would be comfortable asking without getting into the weeds.
Right, and so again, that's on TRB 50 and 51. That is the information that we're presenting for fiscal year 17-18. We have similar information for 16-17, and then we would roll that forward for 18-19. So I understand your question, and we will definitely get there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on, we did have a good meeting with Robin and our budget staff, and I wanted to just say that Robin made a very good plea for the continuous appropriation, but as we've discussed before, it's not something that Department of Finance or the legislature, for that matter, typically would support. But I think what did come out of that conversation is the real problems that were created by the annual appropriation, timing issues, lack of flexibility, those kinds of challenges that Robin and Chris would face in the process. And so what came out of that was this proposal to have this 5-year process, which allows for mid-year adjustments. This is not something that everyone has in the budget process, and I think it's a good compromise to address the timing and flexibility issues. So I'm just wanted to be clear that it was a very collaborative process, and I think we've gotten to a good place. And hopefully it'll evolve as it's presented to the board to be clear, what's changing each year. But I think it's a good solution.
Okay, I'm done. Yeah, no.
So I have a couple questions, and I didn't think about this when we were talking about the 5-year plan for investments. Is that going to be on a rolling basis, so every year it'll maybe? Okay, I have a couple other, Robin. Well, Chris, I guess I might as well stay with your budget. On TRB 50, this goes back to the work plans, the pie charts that are on the work plans. The chart that's on the top left talks about the estimated external investment management expenses, but are there expenses in that budget that are associated with the external investment management?
There are no internal. All of our staff, salaries, expensive equipment are all in the other budget. What's in there is outside legal fees, so not the internal legal staff, but outside legal fees, the investment consultants, the custodian, and the risk system, and then down to the trading system. So it is all, obviously like Bloomberg's an internal system we use. The Aladdin risk system is internally used, but it is an external vendor we pay. And so anything that's external vendors is up in that budget.
Great, thank you. And then Robin, on, let me see what page it is. 58. When we're talking about, I'm looking at the paragraph that's under the Teachers Deferred Compensation Fund, where we're taking under the explanation, it looks like we're changing how we reflect the overhead in the TDCF, but that was due to the allocation study, and I just couldn't make the connection between the two.
So we've been going through a process as laid out in our strategic plan to make sure that we're allocating what I'll call our indirect costs, staff in my area, for example, certain legal staff, staff and facilities, to the appropriate program area. And so as a part of that work, we had been using an allocation methodology that had been in place for, 15 years. And so we went back and adjusted that allocation methodology, and it shows up in your budget for those two funds, the Deferred Comp Fund and the Health Benefits Fund, because the rise out of those two particular funds.
So I still don't have the connection between the allocation study.
Oh, it's not the asset allocation study. It's a
The
cost
allocation study.
It's a cost
staffing
allocation study.
program.
My apologies.
That's
My-
okay. No,
my
I
apologies.
probably should have realized that when
No.
we're talking, when
No,
you were saying
language is-
the study that we did.
Yeah,
Perfect.
language.
Thank you very much. That helps me. Is there anyone else? Oh, Chris?
I have a go back. I need to correct what I said to you on TRB 55. The chart at the top, actually, which chart is it? There it is. Sorry, it's 50. Jack reminded me there's fiduciary insurance that's up there, but there is some internal staff costs of all the groups. Corporate governance, by legislative mandate, is continuously appropriated. So we pay the staff out of the regular budget, but at the end of the year, there's a one-time transfer. So the staff, their training, their travel for the corporate governance unit is also up in that continuously appropriated budget. It is kind of a once-a-year transfer, but that would be the only sort of truly internal group that would be up in the external manager.
So Sheesh and Andrew, if you want to come on up.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for adjusting the time. And so before I will start, I want to recognize, we have a few folks in the back. I want to recognize them. We have a Team CGI executive team here. Would you mind to just stand up? John? So they, yeah. And then we have in the back also our senior PMT, project management team. Can you guys stand up, please? Where's Gabor? I can't see. Gabor is here. Okay.
He's close to me.
He's close to you. Okay. So, this is a big and complex project, and we have a lot of folks, internal and external contractors working in this project. I just want to let you know that we have the executives also in this. We are touching across casters. Other than Chris Elman, I think we are touching all the branches. So all the executives are very supportive and engaged. I want to thank my appreciation to them, as well as we have like 295 internal staff who's watching right now on their desktop here. I think they are working very hard in and out for last 2 years. So I just want to give them appreciation from both from Andrew and us.
Absolutely.
So you asked for the background in the last board meeting, and we put in the write-up. You will have a detailed write-up in there. What we did in this presentation, we are giving what is the purpose of the pension solution, what's the history of the pension solution so far, what is our functional rollouts approach, what is the functional rollouts looks like, what is the budget, what is the governance, what we did so far, what we accomplished, what is the key milestone activities is upcoming, and then what the challenges we are facing. So Andrew and I'm going on and off in this slide. So let's start. First, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the purpose for the project, there are a number of bullets up here, and primarily we're looking to replace the outdated technology of our current pension administration system. Also, in terms of the audit finding we've been working through for several years now around the consistency and accuracy of member data, the new pension solution will allow us to more comprehensively address that finding and improve our consistency and accuracy of data, as well as strengthen internal controls. So, for example, through automation and a more robust segregation of duties that's sort of inherently built into the system, we'll be able to strengthen those controls. And then in terms of the fourth bullet, expanding system functionality, that's really about improving on some of the gaps that we have in our current system, where we have manual workarounds because the technology doesn't allow us to automate certain functions. So we will expand functionality through improved business processes. And then ultimately, that will allow us to reduce risk overall through improved business processes and technology of the new pension administration system. And then in this timeline, you'll see, sort of a number of items across the top on the green bar. I'll draw your attention to the blue bar. The discovery phase, which we initially embarked on several years ago, the future state architecture. What that sort of means in layperson's terms is that was building the roadmap to business transformation and creating a vision for the desired platform of our new pension administration system. And then the planning effort subsequent to that involved many activities, including some critical site visits and lessons learned activities with other pension funds, both here in Sacramento, of course, and as well as across the country. We also used, during that planning phase, developed thousands of both business and technical requirements to serve as the foundation for our new system. And then that RFP development phase, that was something where we incorporated all of our requirements and then had a number of vendors from, again, across the country come to Sacramento and demonstrate their pension systems so that we, before we went out with the sort of the formal RFP process, had an idea of what was available. And then when we issued the RFP, part of the process, and then in the procurement process, of course, we wrap that up by selecting Team CGI. Now, this is the diagram that you saw in the materials write-up. I will kind of draw your attention to the fact that we have a functional rollout. So, as you know, we've split this project into 4 rollouts, 3 kind of major system functionality pieces, and then the 4th rollout is the mobile application. There's not necessarily new functionality, that's just a mobile application. And we did this in sort of contemplation of some of the lessons learned. So, for example, the Big Bang approach was something we decided, as you've heard, not to do, because we wanted to do a couple of things. For example, we wanted to follow the member life cycle through the deployment of the new system and allow the system, allow CalSTRS to recognize some return on investment as we were going through the implementation instead of waiting until the end. So if we had adopted that big bang approach, then you sort of wait until the very end of the project to realize that return on investment. By adopting a phased implementation, we're able to start utilizing some of the new functionality before the project is ended and thus realizing some return on investment. I also want to draw your attention to the dates on the bottom. Those dates are reflective of one of the change requests that we've already approved internally that shifts the dates forward. And we know that those dates are already, we're looking to shift those dates again. We've encountered some difficulties that Ashish will talk about a little bit later in this presentation.
Okay, so in this slide, I think the plan is to give you the overall budget. This is a $251.8 million. What we did, we put into a 5 bucket. The first is the initial phase, is around 7.3 million we spent in the procurement phase. We have internal CASTER staff, 43.5 million. You can see there, they are core team member, around 40, as well as in and out. This means we have around 295 staff working in this. You authorized and approved $136.4 million 2 years back when we execute the contract. And just like Andrew mentioned, there are a couple of change requests which will hit later in the phase. We'll come back here for contract amendments for CGI. You see here in the contracts and vendor, there are around 10 plus contractor working to help in the project with the skill set we don't have. The vendors, IPOC and IVNB who comes here, that's the cost in there. And we have around 10% contingency in money. In the pie chart, you see whatever we spent so far. So it's just nicely we provided that how much money we paid to CGI and how much we spent in the internal staff and the contractor vendor. You also asked about the governance. I think the question came out so many times. So Grant Thornton performs the IPOC role and Maximus performs the IVNB role. This question also came out, their roles and how they function. So IPOC is very wide. They are looking the wide area of the overall project, and IVNB is doing a very deep in there. They are looking at the technical solution engineering of the system. When we have some question about the deliverables and all, they provide their best practices. As well as the analogy, another analogy I can give you, difference between IPOC and IVNB. IPOC is a general practitioner and they are a specialist. IVNB is a specialist. So yeah. Other than, I think in the last time also we are hearing a lot of technical terms going on. We are thinking to provide you in the next time, in the next board meeting, some glossary. So it will help what the terms we are using. I recognize that they are sometimes a little difficult and you're scratching your head. So I think it's a good that we'll add into the report as well as we put in our TRB website. So you can see with the CAT, we use a lot of technical, acronyms. So I hope by the next meeting we'll have that one back to.
Thank you. Yes, I feel like I've learned a new language. I'm not quite as fluent as Ashish yet, but in terms of the project accomplishments, what essentially the main accomplishments that we've achieved to date relate to confirming the requirements and infrastructure components. So we've implemented servers, additional storage, software, network environments, and a recovery site. So the functional rollout 1 design and the beginning of contractor acceptance testing are some things that we've achieved, and that's where we're at today. There's a little bit of additional, more detailed information in the write-up accompanying this item. And then for the upcoming key milestones, so where we're at today, I'll draw your attention to, the dark blue bar is the functional rollout that we're presently in. which is the first one, and that relates to our employers. The light blue bars, so the system in parallel testing, those are the end phases of the contractor acceptance testing, those sort of the larger umbrella. And that's where we have encountered more problems than we had initially anticipated. And again, Ashish will be talking about that shortly. The phase that comes after contractor acceptance testing is the user acceptance testing, and that's where staff really get in and start working on the system and seeing what additional problems, bugs, opportunities for improvement there are. And then that phase is followed by cutover into using the new system. And as we're going through those testing phases, we're also engaged in data conversion and in training both staff and employers. And then simultaneously, we are also continuing to work on design for functional rollout 2. And that is where we're at today.
With the functional rollout plan, we are following the member life cycle. It means we have to have up and running both the system for a period of time, our start system and the new Neospin system. So in there, when we are putting the real data, the synchronization, the data is challenging for Team CGI, and they are working through with that. The function rollout, the schedule delay, when we are seeing a little bit pressure in the FR1, Team CGI shifted their resources to help in FR1. And as you notice, the FR2 is the big rollout, because we are hitting the benefit calculation. And even we have a commercial off-the-shelf product, the Neospin, but we have some unique business requirement which we have to put in there in the configuration. And we are anticipating some little bit more complexity than we thought. So that's why I think this FR2 is delayed. Just like I mentioned, the resource and a little bit, CGI has struggled to put the key qualified resources for the Neospin side. We discuss with them, and they mitigate. They are putting more resources in this area in both the functional rollouts, FR1 and FR2. We asked also IBNB to deep dive of our schedule, and they saw the significant deviation about the complexity, the sizing of the project, and we are discussing with them with the CGI. So as we discussed, there are some pressure in both the rollout, FR1 and FR2, the sizing of the project as well as the resource. And a couple of weeks back, we had a discussion with the corporate CGI, and they came in town and we discussed with them, we raised the concern, and right now we are working through with them to how the mitigation plan to path forward. I can happy to take your questions.
Share?
So I know on our agenda we have Graham here, and we have John from Maximus here. So I assume they'll talk a little bit about that risk piece, but I just was on a long backpacking trip in Montana, and you go by and you see the fire, the old smoky sign saying the risk is high or medium or low for fire. So so I want to ask it for you guys, because I'm sure our consultants will opine on this, but going back to the slide that talked about risk being high in red, that catches your attention. And so I just wonder if you want to, there's a lot in this, and so can you just kind of boil it down to, for us as a board, when we see that and it says high risk, what are the implications? Is it basically just it's going to take us 6 to 12 months longer, or can you just kind of flesh out, and I know you have a crystal ball, but give us a sense of when we say it's high risk right now, what are the implications?
Okay, so very good question. I actually, what happened, because we were preparing for this board meeting, and if you ask me, what is the confidence level at this moment,
And I appreciate the candor. I mean, that's what we want. We want to hear exactly
right.
what
So,
you think about
so
it.
we had a very, it's not our expectation with the Team CGI. We asked them very clear question. The expectation is we would like to see the attainable schedule for FR1, FR2, FR3, not only FR1, and they are very committed. They are providing their mitigation and the path forward by July 31st. So I think the next board meeting and either offsite, we can provide you where we are in there. Right now, I think we got FR1 6-month proposal, but we haven't validated any assumptions. At this moment, the team is digesting that one. If this means if we shift it for 6 months, how confident we are. And that will know the answer within 2 weeks by July 31st, because they are already provided for FR1, a 6-month slip.
When we talk about, there's we've been talking about risk a lot, in the last couple of years on the investment side. And so when we talk about that on this particular program, when we say it's high risk right now, I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of what does that mean? Is it just delayed or costs, or what's the? Yeah.
To this, the project is a high risk, and the oversight consultants are going to indicate that it's either one of them is red and one of them's yellow red, and it's because we have a schedule of March 2018 that we approved that's not attainable, and we understand that it's not attainable, and the whole group understands it's not attainable. So those high risk indicators are there to alert us to, when there's something that's not going right, whether it be budget, scope, schedule. And so this is really focused on the schedule, and the schedule's being strained because of the defects that we're working through. And we want to make sure, and Team CGI is in agreement with this, we want to make sure that we don't pass through a gate and compromise quality just to get to the schedule. And I think that's what we're trying to make sure of. So that's where the high risk comes into play. Now, the confidence level for us right now is we don't know, because CGI is going to be delivering a new schedule to us and looking at the assumptions, and we will have to validate that to see what the new schedule proposal is, how we're going to get there. And that's not just for functional rollout 1, it's for functional rollout 2 and 3, to make sure that we understand all of the schedule and resource requirements that we're going to.
So whatever time, we like to take our time at CalSTRS, whatever time we need to take to get it right. I think it just helps me, as we provide an oversight role, to understand when we say that, what the implications are. So it sounds like you're saying it's mostly on a timeline basis, that we're behind time. We'll have more information in a couple weeks from CGI, and then we'll be able to proceed forward. Okay.
We appreciate your help, to asking, support and all. So.
Thanks, Ashish.
Harry?
Thank you. Appreciate that, and thanks, Ms. Lichtnock, for the additional clarification. It's very helpful. Because from my perspective, I think what we've been talking about really at a high level is we want a high quality product delivered, first and foremost. Secondly, we want it to be within a budget that's reasonable. And third, from my perspective, and I think our collective perspective, is the time frame. So that's the message that has to be continually talked about. We're not going to compromise quality for time. I think that would be a mistake. It's the wrong approach to take. So I'm pleased to hear that the focus is on quality. A specific question, just clarification. So CGI is the commitment is the agreement is about 130 million. They've been paid 40 to date, which is about 30% of the overall contract. And just talk to us in terms of how that those additional payments are made, when, and what that looks like.
So you're right, 30% is.
So my math was
is around 29 to 30%.
very good.
So what we discussed with them, about the FR1 schedule, whatever the commitment they have to make, and they are making that commitment. But until we'll see what kind of deliverable is coming, and we are okay with that, we are not releasing any other payment.
Okay, thank you.
So that one is there, but our payments are all 33, 33, 30, 34, 33 kind of. So obviously, there are some right now the FR2 activities is going on. So we have to honor that one, what is going on in there. We already confirmed some requirements for FR2 also. So if we have to release that payment, we have to release that payment.
So then a final question. I believe folks from CGI are in the room, right? They are here? Great. So I think it's always helpful at the appropriate time that, you know, the affected parties can hear directly what people are saying, especially those of us that have to oversee this whole project.
And to be honest with you, they are in all the board meetings, they are here.
Oh, that's great,
Yeah.
great. So Ms. Licknock talked about a new schedule that we will see. Could you help me understand when we would see that new schedule? And generally, when new schedules of new timelines are extended, there's also accompanying cost associated with that. To what extent do you think those costs would exceed the 10%? We've got a little cushion about 10%, which is it's a reasonable number for a project of this size. How will you begin to give us visibility into the new schedule and potential cost implications? Because that gets to the second quality, cost, time.
Well, we have some timeframes that we've already agreed upon with CGI, and they're pretty tight and quick timeframes for them to deliver a new schedule for functional rollouts 1, 2, and 3. And then we're discussing the relative costs, because it's not just if there's a cost. There's a cost when there's a time extension. There's a cost to CGI, but there's also a cost to us because we're applying resources internally. So we have to look at all of those things and then negotiate and address, how we're going to come to an agreement on that. We plan to have that done by the September board meeting. So we would like to be able to give visibility to that. The first change request that we approved to shift this schedule already, that will require a contract amendment of about $5 million. So we will be coming back to you for at least that later on. Now that contract amendment is for work that's going to be done, in the future. So, and we have quite a bit of a contingency, but we were planning on bringing that back today, but when we were going through this new schedule constraint or strain, we wanted to make sure that we are bringing, bringing to you the most up-to-date information, and if there was going to be a change, we want to do it at the appropriate time.
So that $5 million is on the 131, so it's 3% above the initial cost.
The contract with CGI is 136 point something, and then so it would be an additional, so it brings it about 140.
So final question. I thought I was done. Final question. I don't have to ask your level of comfort in terms of meeting the high quality on budget on time. It's pretty clear that there's consensus that the comfort level is not there, which is okay. It's fine. It's better to admit that than to say we're plowing ahead. I think headline fold news on these types of projects are rampant, and especially in government agencies and private as well. So is there anything that we can do at this point as a board to support the initiative?
But at this moment, I don't think I can just say, I just need only time or I need this much money, because we still, just like Cassandra mentioned, there are 360 view. We had 360-degree view. We are looking in the project, not only the CGI costs, which we already authorized around 4 million or 5 million, but our internal costs, and we have to look our overall costs in the internal staff as well as the vendor cost.
Is
Right.
and some of the challenges that it's facing.
Yeah. Right.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sort of just one question to follow up on both Sharon and Harry's, because I think it's been helpful to understand what you mean by high risk. Is it schedule? Is it quality? Is it cost? What's the risk? And I just want to make sure that that you can tell us that there's nothing so far that suggests that we're going down a path that is going to end up with a product that is less than at the quality level that we have expected?
Very good question. We did extensive lesson learned. We visited at least 20 plus funds who is using the Neospin product in United States. I think everyone mentioned that the software is up to the mark. Even we validate internally. We talk to the different teams if the demos and all, if the software can fit the role. And I think we didn't see any the concerns. There are few customization which we have to do, but I don't think we are there. We just say, oh, this software won't work. We talked to specifically to Robin Shop. We talked to the Andrew Shop about the functionality, the viability of the software, and we didn't get a yellow minus or something. I think we all in agreement that the requirements, the mandatory requirements we put together software is meeting that one. There are some potential small projects which we have to kick off later on about the business intelligence, data warehouse, that we have to do it across, when you're hearing about the big data and yesterday about some internal actuaries and all, they say they need more. That functionality we had to build out. And I think we will come back to you that if we need a sub-projects for that kind of, more reporting, what kind of reporting looks like. So that I think is a small efforts, we have to do it. But the core pension administration piece, we haven't heard any concern about.
So we're at risk of delay, we're at risk of some additional costs, but we're not at risk. We're not hurtling down a path from which we can't recover.
Yes, so
in terms of the quality of the product that we're.
Yeah, I think that at this point, our confidence level is higher in that we believe we've still purchased the right product.
Good, okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions on the slide, actually. And then functional rollout 1, it says that there's delayed testing with actual data. Is that because you're still working out the issues with the testing, or is it an issue with the data conversion, or is it both?
Not related to the data conversion in functional rollout 1. Just like I mentioned, that we had to up both system, start as well as the Neospin for the period of time from functional rollout 1 to 2. When we are putting the real data in there, in there we are seeing the issues. So when we did the artificial data, we are putting, I think everything is fine. As soon as we applying our real data, we are experiencing the issue.
Okay, so the data conversion aspect of the project is on.
Data conversion, I can't say that all green, but is under control. We have our data prep team, and they did a very good job in there. We identify what is the issue in our bad data, and we are fixing that one. So we have a small project going on. This keep going on until we'll finish this project. So we didn't close that project because we know that there will be some fallout will be there.
And specifically in functional rollout 1 in contractor acceptance testing, what we've encountered more defects than we initially anticipated in is the bridging aspect. And like Ashish was just saying, keeping Start and Neospin in sync as we're moving along, the bridging is what we've encountered some problems with.
Okay, thank you. And then on functional rollout 2, can you explain what you mean by the placement of core system functionality?
Can you repeat the question?
That first, if you go back to the slide that we were just on. And under functional rollout 2, it says designs progressing slower than planned due to complex nature and placement of core system functionality. What does core system functionality mean?
So this is a commercial off-the-shelf product. So this is in at least 20 plus places. This is working. But it just comes to us, we had to configure our unique business rules. And that is, I think, is all unique to CalSTRS. And when we are putting that one, it's just having a little bit slower than anticipated.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So you mentioned that I think you're going to be working with CGI on a revised schedule that will come back to us probably in September. Will that be will that revised schedule focus just on functional rollouts 1 and 2, or will it be a revision to the entire pipeline? Yeah, okay.
I think we just asked them, we don't want only FR1 because then we can't do the projection just like you ask, how much the resources, how much the budget. And I don't want we come back, or Cassandra or I or Andrew, that we just say now every 6 months, we need more money or we need more resources. So I think that's why we asked the overall. If we need it in the future, we'll ask some help. But at this moment, I think when we're doing the baseline, we're looking for the overall. That's why we just ask them, not the top-down approach. We want a bottom-up approach that we show how much confident you are to deliver the schedules.
And with some of the issues that we've experienced that caused the schedule delays in the rollouts 1 and 2, are those issues that we should look at and anticipate that those need to be taken into account with the other steps in the schedule?
So we did the lesson learned, as well as we asked IBNB to do the deep dive of our what's going on, what's the root cause of the FR1. And they are applying, the CGI is applying those lesson learned in consideration for when they will come back to us, July 31st.
Yes, IB&B did a deep dive on the schedule, and so when they come up for the presentation, I think they would be able to shed some light on what they see as some of the problems with maintaining the schedule as initially presented.
Alrighty, that clears our speaking list. I think that anytime you hear that risk is high and then defects are added into that language, that there was a real scare on our part that the product that we were going down the road with might not meet our needs, and we've already been through that. And so it's really reassuring to hear that we expected defects. There's just more than what we anticipated. That's what's dragging the timeline, but the product is the product that we need. So thank you very much.
That we really spent some time talking about internally is, we went through a very extensive process to select this product, and we feel that it is the right product. That said, she's just talking very accurately about how complex our system is. Creditable compensation is not typical across in other pension systems. For example, just one example. So the complexity is really something that is driving some of the risk.
Absolutely.
And I know Paul will ask, how much the confidence. So that's why I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Is there any other questions for Ashish or Andrew? All right. Seeing none.
Thank you, guys.
Looks like it's Grant Thornton and Maximus's time. Come on up, gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Good morning.
Good morning. So is John going first this time? Oh, maybe not. Okay, that's fine. Oh, there you go. All right, so good morning, everyone. Graham Finley with Grant Thornton here to present our independent project oversight report. So when we submitted our written board item, I think we developed that about 6 weeks ago, and then we developed the slides that we have up here 2 to 3 weeks ago. And of course, sort of the major theme in both of those was expressing a concern that the project wouldn't be able to hit the functional release 1 date. That date was at risk. So the project sponsors have just come up to confirm that that's actually the case, and that the project will need more time to implement FR1, and there'll be a subsequent delay to FR2 as well, although the exact timeline is still to be determined. So in that sense, the slides that I've prepared are sort of overcome by events in a way. The risks that they were discussing have already come to pass. So for that reason, rather than step through a set of slides that really sort of reflect a situation as it was a month ago, rather than what it is today, I'll skip to this timeline slide I have in here, and then I'll make some comments related to the project update you just heard, and then maybe we can focus on Q&A. So let me just sort of skip through here. Okay. So this is the current schedule for functional rollout 1. I think you saw this slide at the last board item. So a couple of things I wanted to do is maybe take you a little bit inside the decision-making process for the project. Generically, when a project runs into these kind of issues with a delay on a rollout, there's really only three things the project can do when you sort of boil it right down. The first thing they can do is reduce the scope of what's actually going to be implemented, sort of try and do less so you can get it done within the time. The second is, boil it right down, those are the three things the project had in front of it. Reducing the scope of functional release 1 isn't really practical. There's just no real way to do it, and it wouldn't really have helped with the issues they were dealing with anyway. I will say the sort of the crashing the schedule option, so overlapping, training, contract acceptance testing, and user acceptance testing to try and do things in parallel, that did come up as an alternative. The ones I raised, for discussion with the team, and there was half a dozen different questions, but they all had one theme, I would say, that ran through them, and we talked about this a little bit at the last board meeting, this concept of how do you ensure quality as you're pushing towards a date. And all of these questions were around this idea of, if you're trying to push towards a schedule milestone, how do you make sure you don't sacrifice quality? And basically that's exactly the situation that the project's found itself in. The only way to get to that FR1 date, if it indeed is a way, is to sacrifice quality by just accelerating things, overlapping tasks, and probably making it making the actual successful deployment of FR1 significantly more risky. So the project has recognized they need to make a delay. I can't argue with that decision. I think it's the right decision. The question really is, what happens from here? And what's important to consider as the project is doing this replanning exercise. So a couple of things in that regard. The first is being mentioned, I think, by Ashish, is learning the lessons from the last 6 months. There were a few of the issues that they've run into, I think John's maybe going to talk to in more detail, that it's hard to really anticipate, some of the technical challenges they ran into. But as the planning of, whatever the new release date for functional release 1 is, as well as the functional release 2 activities, because there will be both sets of activities happening, in parallel. For a functional release 2, it's not just the logistics of the actual joint application design sessions where people are going through the requirements and figuring out what the system design should look like. That in itself is a challenge, because you've got to figure out who the people are, where the people are going to be, how those people are also supporting functional release 1, and making sure that there's enough time for everybody to do that. But there's also still some open design questions for functional release 2, and that to us is an area of risk, that there are some open questions about exactly the way the solution will work. And depending on the answer to those questions, or how long it takes to get to an answer, that is a source potentially of additional delay. So that's something we'll be looking for as the revised schedule is put together, how much of those things have been put into place. So the other point, and I don't think the project is doing this, but I'll make the point, is there can be a tendency when there is an extension for people to sort of relax and say, okay, now we've got more time, we sort of take the foot off the accelerator a little bit. And the project really doesn't have the opportunity to do that. They've still got to keep pressing hard. It's just a matter that they can put together a timeline that, recognizing the issues they run into today, is genuinely achievable. The last thing I would say, just to respond to a question that came up, we're in concurrence that from everything we've seen so far, there's nothing that suggests to us that the Neospin product is not the right product for CalSTRS, and it won't work. The issue is the ability to implement that at a timeline and with quality and with a budget that's acceptable to everybody. So with that, I'll take questions.
So, Graham, just your comment about how the tendency of, kind of a group think is when you get an extension, there's the tendency of a group to think, okay, we can take a breather, we have more time, that kind of thing, and that we really don't have that type of, we don't have that type of time in this project per se. And this is a very long project for us. And because of the delays, the timeline is being extended. Rollout 2 is going to be extended. Rollout 3 is going to be extended. When does project fatigue start to become a risk?
I think it's always a risk, you know, and you have to be careful when you're looking at the, you know, just day to day, how hard people are being driven. Now, I think the project's done, you know, some reasonable things in terms of assuming a percentage of productivity. You know, that not assuming that everybody's going to do 8 hours of project work every single day, because there are other things, you know, that come into place and people are driving through, you know. So I think the project's thinking about that. It is something that has to be watched over time. And certainly when, you know, the project's been going on for several years now, and there's already been some turnover of people, and that will probably occur again. So that succession planning, if you want to think of it that way, is another thing that needs to be thought about.
And you're monitoring that for us also? Yes. Thank you. All right, is there any other questions?
Good morning. So my name's John Lemelin. I'm with Maximus. I'm the IVNV consultant and here to provide our update. There we go. Technical issues. All right. So as been mentioned several times before, including by Ashish, IVNV did raise the project risk to red this past month. I think I appreciated the questions that were talked about earlier when this first came up. I think Ashish and Cassandra both represented our view correctly. We see this as a schedule risk based on the current schedule, which has FR1 go live in March. And it represents a cost or financial risk, because typically delays mean money somewhere along the line, whether it's a vendor or internal costs. We do not see this as a long-term quality risk. It's a schedule risk. And it is based on the schedule that everyone is now acknowledging they're going to rework. So I know it looks bad, it's not good, but there's work addressing the issue or addressing the challenge. So that's kind of where I wanted to start. We did an analogy last time we met. I think it was a watermelon or something. I'm going to do another analogy, and this is the check engine light on your car. So you're driving down the road and your check engine light comes on. That's the way I see this red. Maximus is turning the check engine light on for your $250 million car that you're driving. So it's a high risk based on the current schedule, which has FR1 going live in March. And again, a lot of the people here have already represented that that's not achievable, and we definitely obviously agree with that. So we always end up talking about the bad news. I always like to start with the good news. The project is working very hard. People are working lots of nights and weekends, and I think burnout, Dana, is a good issue and a good question. I think there's a full acknowledgement of the issues with the schedule, and people are working on it. And the fact that the CGI executives and I think actually one of their global execs is in the back of the room right now. It demonstrates the commitment of CGI to fix the problem. I know there have been a lot of meetings with Ashish and Andrew and Robin and Cassandra to bring them to the table and to work out something that's reasonable and doable. So there's always good stuff going on. I want to acknowledge the 300 and some odd people that Ashish mentioned who are probably watching right now, and a lot of hard work going on, a lot of good work. So with that, we've got, IVNV has got two basic areas of concern, both of which you've heard before. One is, I'll start with project management. That's our largest area of concern. And this is based not only on our ongoing work of monthly IVNV reviews, where we look at 88 different attributes of the project and assess them every month, but this is also the results of a deep dive, as Ashish had mentioned. So at Callister's request, Maximus did a deep dive, a very detailed analysis of the current project schedules, current as of 2 months ago, and did a deep dive on those schedules. So basically, lots of findings, lots of recommendations. We have a 107-page report that goes to the project with lots of things for them to do. But for this audience, I think there's two major findings, which are the first two bullets. Number one, testing. Right now, it's called contractor acceptance testing, which is kind of the CGI's testing, and there's all kinds of different parts of that, many of which are having problems. Most of the problems are more bugs than people expected, more issues and challenges or problems that the software is exhibiting, and then more time to fix them. And I can go in all kinds of different kinds of testing, but for this group, there's a lot of testing going on, and a lot of hard work going on. Some of the testing is having serious problems, more than I think anyone expected. The real difficult part of the FR1 schedule is the fact that the user acceptance testing, which is the next phase of testing, hasn't even started. That's the real, I mean, there's lots of critical aspects of the project, but that is a very critical part, because that's no longer CGI and your vendors testing, but it's your CalSTRS people testing. And that's an absolutely critical part of the project. A lot of things will come up, a lot of unknowns will be identified. That's ordinary, customary, that's what should happen in UAT, that's what will happen in UAT, and that hasn't even started for FR1. So it was one of the areas that we found in our deep dive really needed to be revisited. So number one is FR1 in the schedule associated with that, the work and the resources and the dependencies around the current rollout. The second part and the second finding was, again, based on our deep dive, where we went back to the contract, went back to the original proposed schedule for the project, and looked at some of the time durations of some of the work as it was originally envisioned. Many of the changes that are currently in the schedule have been approved. They're based on the CRs, as Ashish has mentioned, Ashish and Andrew mentioned. So they're accepted, approved changes, but notwithstanding that, we looked at a view of how much work and how much time did we, the project, think FR1 was originally going to take, and how long is it likely going to take. And there's a significant increase in the amount of time, and there's been a reduction in the scope. So then we applied that to FR2 with a rule of thumb that FR2 is likely more complicated than FR1. Again, based on assumptions in the contract that have all been overcome by events, we're concerned about FR1. In some ways, we're more concerned with FR2, FR3, and the other remaining phases of the system.
John, you just said something about reduction in scope. Can you talk to us about that a little bit more, please?
Sure. There was two. Sorry, I should have seen the eyebrows. Again,
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
And I don't mean to surprise you. These are approved change requests that went through the process on the project. One of them was a delay to FR1, a 6-month delay to FR1, 7-month FR2, and 6-month FR3s, which have been approved. And then there was a second CR, which moved some functionality out of FR1 and moved it into FR3. So when we did our comparison of what was originally in the contract, where that functionality would have been provided in FR1, that functionality is no longer considered part of FR1, and FR1's going to take now maybe 12 months longer.
If I could just add a comment. We have spoken about it. It's the employer account management component, and we did move the payment deliverable from 1 to 3 as well.
Okay, so and obviously we have our normal monthly IV&V report. We have now a second report that relates to this deep dive. So there's a lot more information that obviously is provided to the project team as far as ways to mitigate these risks. But for you all, those are the two biggies. To go back to my analogy, if I could, your check engine light turns on, and what do you do with the car? Well, you bring it into the mechanic. Luckily, Maximus is your mechanic, along with Grant Thornton. And for this analogy, I would say that you're down 2 quarts of oil. That's basically the issue. Your check engine light is on. You're driving a $250 million car. You're down 2 quarts of oil. The first quart is a detailed, bottom-up schedule and plan for FR1. what are the resources, what are the dependencies, who are the people, what are the holidays, to make sure that you're not burning everybody out, and building a realistic, achievable schedule for FR1, including contingency, specific time and effort identified in the schedule for things that you don't know yet, because they will come up for FR1. That's your first quart of oil. Your second quart of oil is the rest of the project. It's a bottom-up, maybe not as detailed, because you may not know exactly who the person is leading the JAD on, February 3rd, 2020, but all the work, all the resources, all the dependencies, all the milestones, all the assumptions in the model that's used to determine how long this work is going to take for the rest of the project. FR2, FR3, and FRM, I think it's called. So those are your 2 quarts of oil, and we're recommending pull over and put them both in. And I probably beat that analogy farther than it should be. The last suggestion is Maximus did a deep dive on the original schedule a couple months ago. We're available to do another deep dive once you get those new schedules, to do our another pass at the deep dive to make sure that you've got everything covered. It's encouraging to know. In fact, we met with CGI representatives and executives yesterday. And as Graham mentioned, they're already working on these 2 new schedules. So again, lots of good work going on. They're on it, and the project is on it, and they're working on it. No one's ignoring these issues. They're busy pouring the oil in right now, I suppose, but there's still work to be done. And in the meantime, it's a high-risk project, high risk of schedule or high risk of cost. Issues. I thought I might pause there. I don't want to go too long, but yeah.
Well, I think I heard 2 different things, and I think at one point you said FR1 is delayed 6 months, FR2 7 months, FR3 6 months. So first of all, that you add those together so that the total is 19 months?
No.
Or it's just that it's that the whole project, FR3 is going to be delivered 6 months later than our original schedule. Okay.
Correct.
But then I think you said that FR1 is delayed 12 months.
Yeah, so there was a CR that was approved through the project, a change request approved through the project several months ago that agreed, and it was CalSTRS and CGI working together. They agreed to move the go-live date for FR1 out 6 months, the go-live date for FR2 out 7 months, and the go-live date for FR3 out 6 months. That schedule has FR1 going live in March. And that's the schedule that we are reporting is not achievable. That's the schedule that now may move out another 6 months.
So that's basically the new news to us, is an additional 6 months delay.
Yeah, and I probably shouldn't say 6 because I'm looking at early drafts, but that's the news that there's a new schedule coming in a couple weeks that will have more delay than the original 6 month delay, which got you to March.
Okay, so that original 6 month delay, the 676 delay, that's old news, basically.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so it's the new news that it's now something like an additional 6 month delay, and that's what's raising the concerns.
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
All right, is there any further questions? This pretty much was just on the pension solution. And I know, Graham, you have more information in your report to us on data prep and all that kind of stuff. Were you going to report on any of that?
I did include it in the slides. I can very briefly, for data preparation and the Business Direct retrofit project, which is a new one that's recently started up to make the changes to Business Direct that are necessary in order for it to interface with Pension Solution. We're rating both of those a green at the moment. BD retrofit is really just started. They're getting their environment set up, their requirements defined, project's going on fine to date. They're starting to integrate with the broader Pension Solution project. Data preparation as well, we're rating green. They have a few issues around Resourcing, nothing really significant. The one item that we call out there that it does impact pension solution is just, and I think we talked about this a couple of months ago, there are a series of data issues that are known, that data prep has identified that need to be resolved, and there's been these ongoing dialogue with CGI around how those get resolved, and there's been a verbal agreement, but it hasn't been formalized in writing to date about how that's going to happen. So that still leaves a bit of an open question mark there until we see that in writing. So that's sort of the one item on data prep.
Okay, I had a couple questions on the Business Direct, and it might be that Jack's able to answer these questions. So it's not that we're having to change Business Direct because of things we found that we needed to change in Business Direct. It's to marry it, for lack of a better term, with Pension Solution, correct? So will we, because that was our first big sea change for staff, and there were some bumps in the road on training and things like that. Are we going to have new training? Do you foresee any bumps in the road? Around Business Direct.
Actually, Robin, is there new training required on the changes we make in Business Direct? I'm not sure. Great question.
I just remember the angst that we had during that time. Are we going to revisit that? That's what I really want to know. I probably should have just cut to the chase, huh, Robin?
So there will be training needed for revisions in our processing around pension administration. By and large, that impacts staff in accounting, not staff throughout the organization.
Okay.
So.
And the staff, particularly in accounting, are now so familiar with it that it's probably not going to be the heartburn that we had before.
I'm not, there will be changes.
Yep.
So,
and that always
we need
does
to plan
cause
for those
heartburn.
changes, and we are actively planning for those changes.
Okay, great. And then Deloitte is also going to be doing something in parallel. Are they
Deloitte's
gonna,
actually the vendor for making the changes in Business
into Business Direct?
Direct, yes.
So is there any, will their functional rollout one, well, when you mention their functional rollout one, are they going to be running in parallel with Pension Solution, or is theirs a totally separate rollout?
No, it is absolutely tied.
Okay.
And so the shift in schedule has an impact.
And how does that affect our contract then with Deloitte?
I don't know yet.
Okay. And Graham, you're going to be keeping an eye on that for us, right? Okay, that sounds good. Are there any further questions? Paul, you were done, or did you have
I was
anything?
done, yeah.
Already. We've never actually asked CGI to come and speak with us or anything, and we've now had our staff talk about CGI. We've had 2 independent contractors talk about CGI. So I'd like to offer up the chance, if any of you want to address the board directly, you have the opportunity. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'd like to offer the opportunity. Thank you.
He just jumped out of the chair. So excited to talk to the board.
Oh, yeah, you come on all up.
Here, come on up.
Welcome.
The comments. Oh,
There you go.
which one?
You're good. You're good. You're good.
Right. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Greg Hussey, and I am the local executive. And I just want to confirm that we're actively working with CalSTRS and appreciate the collaboration and are working closely to make sure we're delivering a quality product as you're expecting. And I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself, but that's about all I had to share.
Greg, are you on site here, or are you just in Sacramento?
I'm on site, and I also do reside in Sacramento, but I am on site right now.
All right, very good.
All right?
Yep, we do. We have somebody who wants to ask you a question. Harry?
No, just to reinforce that, nice to put a name and a face together. 2 terms that you use that we've used quite a bit today, quality, exclamation point.
Yes.
And collaboration with our staff is essential.
Yes.
Because it is an investment of our time as well in terms of ultimately it's our oversight responsibility to see that a quality project is delivered within a reasonable budget and on time. So great to put a name, face. Thanks for coming forward. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. if we go back to item 10, this is also information. This is the review and the replication of the GASB and financial reporting actual evaluation. I'm sure everyone has read that. I'd like to combine 10 and 11 together, so if we could get ready to read the pertinent sections of the committee reports that the board has to vote on, I'd appreciate that. We all have copies of the written reports that will be included in our minutes, and I think we have benefits and services and comp that have to bring something forward. So Sharon, when you're ready.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
Right now?
Right now?
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead and,
Let's do
but
it.
go ahead and call in and.
Yep.
All righty.
By direction of the Benefits and Services Committee, I move to approve the recommended revisions to the Benefits and Services Committee charter outlined in item 5 of the committee agenda, attachment 1, BNS 12 through 13. The charter would also include the additional language regarding the pension to defined contribution program presented by staff at the committee meeting.
All righty. We will include that in our consent agenda vote, unless somebody wants to pull it. For compensation, by direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt revisions to the incentive performance criteria recommended by Pension Consulting Alliance, PCA. There's actually 3 of them. And also by direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt changes to the asset class portion of the incentive criteria for the Chief Investment Officer, CIO, Deputy Chief Investment Officer, DCIO, recommended by PCA by the fiscal year 2017-18. And by direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt updates to the competency criteria for personal performance targets for the 2017-18 performance plan year for the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Chief Investment Officer, CIO, as described on Comp 3536, with a clarification of replacing the language on Comp 36, which states corporate board diversity, with what's written here is corporate governance principles. I think where we landed actually on that is board-directed initiatives. Isn't that where we landed yesterday? It was. It's board-directed initiatives. So we'll make sure that that gets corrected for the minutes. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any of the board members would like to pull for discussion? Then I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Harry and seconded by Sharon to approve items 10 and 11 on our consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? And Karen? It's A, B, C, and D. It's all these. We just did all of these. Okay. All righty.
But I thought it was 11.
When you're done with that, I just want to make a comment on the board travel.
I'm sorry, hang on just a second. I want to make sure I said the right thing. Did I say 10 and 11?
Yes.
Okay. All righty. Jack, you wanted?
I just want to make sure you all as board members were aware of a law that was passed in California that's affecting staff now, but it also affects travel of the organization, just so we all know that piece of legislation that was passed. It was AB 1887, prohibiting the use of state funds used for travel. And there are currently 8 states on that list: Alabama, Kansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Texas. And essentially that prohibits state travel to those states with some exceptions. Those exceptions are the enforcement of California law, litigation to meet contractual obligations incurred before January 1st of 2017, to comply with requests by the federal government to appear before committees, to participate in meetings or training required by a grant or required to maintain grant funding, to complete job-required training necessary to maintain licensure, for the protection of the public health, welfare, or safety. So we have applied, obviously, to be in compliance with the Attorney General's direction. We have applied this already to some staff travel to conferences. Brian and his staff have a process in place internally to review travel that might be in question related to this, and we've asked Brian and Fiduciary Council really to give this some relevance to the work we do here. Obviously, this wasn't written around investment due diligence and those things that we do as an organization, so we needed some, I think, some added legal perspective around that. But I think as you all look at education and think about things, I want to make sure you were aware of the law and the states that are involved, because sometimes they do cross paths with some of our conferences. So that was all today. And Brian, did you have anything you need to add? Want to make sure I framed that correctly.
Yeah, I would only add that we are really taking a very detailed look at the implications this would have for the work that Chris and his staff do. Although I know this organization and this board fully support the statute and the reasons and the guidance that are contained therein, there is potential friction between the business processes that Chris and his staff do on behalf of the fund. And so we think that that's where we're really spending a bit of time trying to get that just right, so we have the freedom to continue. And so we're doing a deep legal dive and try to come up with an approach that works.
Does that revolve around our authority under Prop 162?
It could.
It could.
It could.
So that'll be included as part of the analysis then?
It could, yeah, that's the big gun, but there are, you know, there are other pieces in here that seem to, you know, they recognize our contractual requirements. We have managers. I mean, there are other nuances to this. Certainly we want to comply with the letter and the spirit of the law. We just don't want to do it to the detriment of making money for the fund.
But again, this is moving list, so states have just been added to it, like Texas. So it's an open, changing agenda over time. So we do want to make sure we understand this as it goes on. Yeah.
And you'll put that list and keep that list updated on our reference site?
I'll do that.
For education, please. Chris? Yeah,
I
Chris?
just want to add for the record, as they both have said, we understand the law, we get that, but you do have billions of dollars of assets in those states. You have money managers in those states. And we have to be able to do our job, and proper due diligence is visiting, seeing the people there, not waiting for them to come here. We don't want to try and manage buildings or infrastructure just from Sacramento. So it's one of the more consistent challenges of being a money manager inside a governmental entity, and we appreciate working with Jack and legal counsel to find a balance.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chris.
Sharon?
And Jack, I just had a question about, are other states making these kinds of
I'm not aware of that. I've certainly visited with my other executive directors and made them known about the changes, but I haven't gotten feedback to the other states have taken a look at these discriminatory laws. I've not. Brian, have you come across any other state that's done that?
I'm not aware of that.
So we're the only.
Yeah.
We're.
Yeah,
We're
but again, as
outliers.
Brian said,
We're
this law was passed with good reason around real issues. So we've got to think about it.
And then just, I guess the other piece I was thinking of, I know that you communicated, because Dan and I were going to a conference that is in Texas.
Well, I communicated all the major pension all the trade associations. I sent them a copy of the law, copy of the states, and asked them to think harder about where they schedule things in the future. So I went ahead right away and notified all of them.
Great.
Come to California.
Hey.
So Jack, along the lines of Sharon's question, have we reached, I know you've reached out to the organizations that we belong to and have talked about it, but have you reached out to other entities in California that also might have the ability to sway those organizations who are now affected by it? And I'm looking at the conference that, for the board's information, the conference that Sharon and I were thinking about is a conference where there was a training module. We did the first two components of we did the first two modules. There's two more. It was being offered in Texas in conjunction with a fire and police conference. Are we reaching out to fire and police so that they also write the organizations that they're part of and ask, to put that same weight as we are?
Yeah.
I think that's something that we need to consider.
Okay, let me think better about how to maybe get that word
Yeah,
out.
how to go
Yeah.
about that. And then, obviously, this was a piece of legislation. It went by us. It affected us. And I don't know how aware of it we were. Certainly, I don't think the board was aware of it. Do we need to broaden our scope of the things that affect us as a system when things come down legislative like this? Because it would have been, I imagine that we would have tried to at least tell the legislature, this is going to affect how we do business.
Yeah.
We want to comply. We agree with the reasoning, but just like we asked for a carve-out in some of the divestitures, we could have asked for a carve-out. So
That's a fair comment. We usually get notified of all bills affecting state agencies, but I hear your comment.
Yeah.
We might have worked better on the exception list to give a little more definition to our fiduciary needs, but I hear you. Yep.
Alrighty, are there any other comments? Alrighty. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jack. Alrighty, the next item, I want to hold 12, 13, and 14 to the end of the meeting. We do have fiduciary training and the charter school project. I'd like to do a 5-minute break, and hopefully we will be done by 12:30. Alrighty, 5-minute break, please.